G'day West Coast Eagles fans, welcome back to True Eagle for my reaction to day one of the 2025 National Draft. I did intend to get this video up a little bit earlier, but I had a splitting headache last night, and today is probably a better day to do it now that I've had time to sleep on it and reflect a little bit about how things went down for the West Coast Eagles. Little bit of intrigue as to what happened. It was probably more eventful than I was expecting with, the trade that happened and a couple of bids. In fact, we made 3 bids on 3 different Gold Coast Academy players. We ended up with 3 quality players, in my opinion. So I guess we'll just go through the picks one by one and discuss what happened, and then also have a little look at what might happen for us in day 2. For the record, I'll be live on the True Footy YouTube channel tonight for Footy from the Flat, where we will watch the draft and react to it as it happens. So, yep, we dictated the first 4 picks and the order of the national draft, and I thought it was curious to me, I suppose, that we made a couple of bids, or at least the second player that we bid on was a bit of a surprise. But we'll start with Willem Dersma, a player that has clearly entrenched himself as the number 1 prospect in this year's draft, even if mid-year that wasn't necessarily the case. His back end of the year was really strong, and you only have to look at his highlights to see what the potential upside there is with a Duursma. I mean, the athletic profile is clearly there. He's a great height at 193, so he's a really good aerialist and a really good intercept marker. And he's got that line-breaking dash, which very few players in the AFL actually possess to that level, especially when he is versatile, which he is. He's played on many different lines, and I read somewhere that it was actually West Coast who requested that Dersma start playing around the ground towards the back end of the year to see how he would go in different positions. So we've seen him play at VFL level, and he's played more as a running defender who can intercept as well. And I'd imagine that's where he starts at AFL level. The upside, I suppose, with Dersma and what he can become is, I think eventually the goal has to be for him to become a midfielder. Perhaps the one thing he probably needs to continue to demonstrate is that physicality. That's probably not how I would describe him. He's much more smooth-moving, line-breaking. He's got a good ground ball game and a good aerial game as well. So while I think he starts as a running defender and he's probably going to produce a lot of highlights with that marking and running game, I do think that in time we would love him to become an on-baller. So that's the hope, and if he becomes a successful on-baller, we're going to have a very dynamic midfield that can hurt you in a number of different ways with Duursma, Hewitt and Reid. So I am excited about that, and there was no other way that was going to go. So happy to lock that in, no surprises there. We then bid it on Uland. That made perfect sense. That was forecast months ago, really. And then the bid on Harry Dean surprises me. I can't help but be a little concerned that we thought Harry Dean was so highly ranked in this year's draft that we would have been prepared to draft him at pick 3. I'll put that one aside. I'll defer to their judgment. They're actually professionals and I'm not. But, if we were happy with an outcome, we would have walked away with Dersma and Dean. I don't know if I would have been pleased with that as a fan, considering we didn't bid on Dill Patterson or Dan Annabon. In any case, it doesn't really matter. But I was curious to see that we rated Harry Dean above Cooper Duff-Tytler, who we then took at pick 4. So, look, to address, some of the things I said earlier in the year about going Dersma and CDT, a couple of things. First of all, I think, in particular Dersma, but also CDT, probably hadn't entrenched themselves as clear top options at the time. And I really wanted to walk away from this draft with a midfielder, and it seems like we're going to go a little bit longer before we draft another midfielder. There has been a complete dearth of midfielders in this rebuild. We just haven't drafted many. We don't have a particularly favourable attitude towards recruiting midfielders. It's really curious. It's multiple administrations here. I'm hyper-focusing on this issue here for the pick for CDT, because the fact of the matter is there wasn't really a clear option for us to go ahead of him. There was a lot of talk about Dyson Sharp, who I do think would have been a great fit genuinely at West Coast. Evidently, he ended up going pick 13. So I am comfortable with the fact that we didn't reach for a guy that we didn't think was, the best available talent. And I wouldn't knock CDT's talent. Of course, he's a little bit unconventional as a ruckman, not a particularly big leaper or strong hit-out ruckman, but elite at ground level once the ball hits the deck, and it will be like having an extra midfielder. And we do need that. So it may take a few years before we really see the fruits of that selection, but there is a lot of upside there, and if he develops the ability to really stick a mark and kick goals, then suddenly we have a very high potential key position player on our list. I don't know if he's ever going to be our number 1 ruck. I am intrigued to see how we play him in his first year. He's not particularly skinny, but nonetheless, I think that it will take time before he's really ready to be exposed as a ruckman. So I wonder if we play him as a key forward in his first season, get some games into him, because I think he's relatively ready, but no 18-year-old is perfectly ready for a ruck role as such. So it'd be interesting to see how we manage both him and Archer Reid in the same team and who gets games. It could be both of them. It could open the door for Archer Reid to play back, which is something I've talked a little bit about on this channel as well, because with his attributes, I think he'd make a good key back, and he's probably more ready to ruck more serious minutes next season over a Cooper Duff-Tytler. But long term, comfortable with those picks. Again, really want a midfielder sometime soon, but it wasn't the draft for it, evidently. So then we went a little bit quiet for a bit, and then there were a number of picks gone. Dyson Sharp went at pick 13. I couldn't help but notice that was the pick that we tried to get from Carlton. So in an alternative timeline, we would have potentially had Carlton's pick 9 had we been able to get that deal done, and we would have ended up with Dyson Sharp. We know that now. As it happens, we did trade up, but we traded up one selection. And I've had time to sleep on this and feel a bit more comfortable with it. But in real time, it didn't really look like we had a rock-solid plan here. So we traded up and gave up our future second, which I believe, I'm not sure if this has been confirmed, but I believe it was St Kilda's future second that we received for Liam Ryan. So a reasonable price to pay to move up one spot, only to then double bid on a couple of Gold Coast players. And I'm curious to see what West Coast strategy it was here. I've read, online that the Eagles really did expect Adensall to not be matched by the Gold Coast Suns, and that is genuinely who we wanted. But of course, that was if you want to call it a miscalculation or what, I think we rolled the dice and it didn't pay off there. We didn't get Bo Adensall. Bo Adensall being ranked there also seems curious to me. Again, I'm not the professional here, so I'll leave it to them. But that one seemed a little bit odd to move up a spot simply to bid. I can only imagine if that was our strategy, we moved up one spot to try and squeeze Gold Coast for points and hope that they wouldn't match the bid. Because I presume if Hawthorn had selected, they wouldn't have ended up with Bo Adensall. So it was a steep price to pay to eventually miss out on the guy that you really wanted, presumably in Bo Adensall. At least that's what I'm reading. But I question why we didn't bid on Dill Patterson at pick 4. And make that a lot simpler for ourselves. It's unclear what exactly happened there. I think it's entirely likely West Coast probably rated Adensall and Lindsay in a tier above what they could have got, perhaps if we just held where we were. Like, I presume there was an expectation that we either thought Hawthorn would select Josh Lindsay, or this is distinctly possible too, there was noise about maybe the Bulldogs trading up. I don't know that to be true, but it would make sense. If we thought the Bulldogs were trying to trade up with Hawthorn, we needed to offer something to get ahead of them because they were also heavily linked to Josh Lindsay as well. So that one actually makes sense to me. But I'm trying to make myself feel a little bit better that we gave up the compensation we received for Liam Ryan simply to take Josh Lindsay here. In time, I suppose we'll see, because Toomey does a really good article every year talking about the trades that didn't happen during the 2025 draft. So it'd be great to get a little more clarification on that. But, putting aside the trade, Josh Lindsay is a really good talent. And I remember earlier in the year talking about it with Dill on True Footy. And for those unaware, Dylan is a really avid draft watcher. He attends a lot of Coates Talent League games, and he's got a really great lens on the Coates Talent League in particular. And I remember earlier in the season him talking about CDT and Lindsay at pick 1 and 2 for West Coast. So there has been a bit of a slide there, and if I had to guess, it's probably just the lack of versatility. Lindsay is a genuine playmaker halfback, and he's the best kick in the draft. And what I particularly like about him is the amount of kicks that he nails when he's facing the wrong direction. He can swing it across his body and really hook them, and it always hits a target from what I can tell. So from that point of view, he does add something we don't have. We did add McCarthy, and we saw what a difference McCarthy made to our best 22 when he came in. Perhaps Lindsay adds to that. There's a couple of different ways we can hurt you off halfback now. Perhaps McCarthy plays in the midfield. Not sure if that is Lindsay's future, but seems like a very safe, dependable 200-game player. And while I did want a midfielder, I probably still would have gone Lindsay over Adensall. So that surprised me a little bit that we rated Bo Adensall quite that highly. So from a talent point of view, I'm very comfortable with the value that we got from all those players. But as I alluded to earlier in this video, it's another draft we walk away without a genuine midfielder. We do technically have 2 more picks. 29 and 34 as they currently stand as we head into day 2. Now, we've kind of been thinking one of those would be Tyler Williams and the other might be Banfield. I suppose the best case scenario here for West Coast is if Kobe Evans and Banfield slip through entirely, and we can either match a bid with Tyler Williams with one of those picks and then take another live selection, or we may trade that into the future. And I wouldn't mind that if it gets us back into the second round, given we burned one in this year's draft, moving up to get Lindsay. If we can get another second rounder, trade one of those picks out, still end up with Tyler Williams, still have a list spot to match Banfield or Evans, that could be the way it goes. Or we're really confident that Evans and Banfield slip all the way through, And maybe we take another live pick because there's some good players there. Blake Threadgold's still available as a key defender. I'd imagine he probably goes pick 1 on the night, to be honest, on the second night. Ollie Greaves is still there as probably the best available rated midfielder. I didn't particularly want us to take him with our third selection, but naturally at our fourth, it's a different story. Noah Hibbins-Hargreaves is still there. Riley Onley is still there. There are some decent talents, so I'm comfortable with whichever way that goes, and I'm hopeful that we also end up with all of Evans, Banfield, and Tyler Williams as well. If we do take a live pick, it would be nice to add a midfielder. I was talking to Dylan about this, and I said, since the Eagles really started this rebuild in 2021, the only midfielders we've drafted are Campbell Chesser, if you can call him one. He's kind of a wingman, utility, but we'll call him a mid because he sort of played there at West Coast. There's Campbell Chesser. There's Harley Reid, who is pick 1 and the obvious choice. Then there was Elijah Hewitt, great selection. I will give them credit for that one. Then you get to guys like Tom Gross, Clay Hall, and I suppose you can include the mature age of Greg Clark in 2021 as well if you skip back. So not a lot of attention played to the midfield, where I think it's an important part of the ground. It's not the only important part, but it does feel like we're very happy to bolster the back line at the moment. And, aside from signing Dev Robertson as a listed free agent, Finlay Macrae, Harry Schonberg, it doesn't feel like West Coast feel like the midfield needed addressing. And I sincerely hope that it's not a plan to get Starcevic into the midfield next year, because if that's plan A, then I'm losing a little bit of faith in the way we're doing things. But again, I'm just some idiot talking online. I'm just giving you my opinion, and I know that they know better, so we'll see. But some interesting decisions in this draft for sure. The rating of Harry Dean at 3 and the rating of Bo Adensall, where we rated him for a start. I suppose you could say, if I'm being consistent and fair, Bo Adensall is a midfielder. So I guess that maybe it's a bit of a double standard of me to say, oh, you're not taking midfielders, but then we tried to get Bo Adensall. In the end, we failed. Anyway, so, but I'm talking more like, not so much about last night and the players we picked at those selections, but a broad strategy here by West Coast over the last 5 years. It's very half-back and small forward focused, and not a lot of midfield. And I just think that's probably going to hold us back in 2026 and maybe 2027 as well. The fact that we're not really trying to improve our deficiencies. We're more just taking the best available players, which will probably pay off in the long term. But this is the worst goddamn midfield I've ever seen in my life. So I really hope there's some sort of plan there. Hopefully Banfield and Evans can save the day for us. But it'd be intriguing to see what we do with night 2. Hopefully there is a midfielder there. But I do think that Josh Lindsay will be a good player, and I'm glad we have him. Maybe he frees up another defender to move into the midfield. Maybe not Starcevic, but maybe Hoff goes back there now that we got Starcevic in. Or perhaps more likely Tom McCarthy plays more full-time mid next year. Cooper Duff-Tytler and Duursma, they're not high risk, but certainly high payoff, with some doubt around the positions they play at AFL level. But if they do come good, we will come out of this draft looking very, very good, to be honest. So I am excited by that, and I'm going to allow myself to get excited about them as prospects. I just have concerns about our overall list build, but maybe it was unrealistic to expect anything different with the way night 1 planned out and the players that were available. So maybe I just need to be a bit more fair on how that worked out. But anyway, let me know in the comment section your thoughts, guys. I'm looking forward to these guys playing at AFL level. Can I just say as well, I think all 3 of them seem like ripping young men as well. I thought that prior to the draft. I thought Cooper Duff-Tytler, Josh Lindsay, those guys seemed like sweethearts. I thought Dersma handled his interviews really well and seems to have a confidence that is also, underscored a little bit by some genuine humility. He seems like a nice kid, and it makes him even easier to like. But that's all I have for you for the time being, guys. Make sure you tuned into True Footy tonight, and I'll be back again tomorrow with another review video talking about our overall draft mix. And then there's the rookie draft on Friday. I think that happens in the morning. So, I think that's where we'll formalise Finlay Macrae, Dev Robertson, Harry Schonberg. And it remains to be seen what we do with the other spots. Maybe Kobe Evans goes Cat B, and maybe Banfield goes on the proper rookie list. We'll see what happens there. But fingers crossed that we've done a good job. I suppose we'll find out over time. Let me know in the comments what you think, guys. I'll see you in the next one. Up the Eagles.